Hi there, I'm Robyn Hatcher, and I'm a professional speaker, trainer, and coach on all things communication. I love to work with financial advisors, lawyers, business professionals to help them be more confident on stage, off stage, and in between stages. And right now, on the virtual stage. So I'm going to be talking to you about the virtual communication chemistry. My main thing is communication chemistry, right? And so virtual communication requires a whole other kind of chemistry. However, it still begins with the very all too important 3 V's of effective communication. And what they are first is a visual, what is seen. Second, we have the vocal, what is heard. And third, we have the verbal, what is said. So when you think about those things, the difference between the verbal and the vocal are the fact that the vocal deals with the sound of your voice, the pitch, the range, the cadence, all of that is vocal. Whereas the verbal carries just the actual words, the sentence structure, the content, the vocabulary. So that's the vocal, that's the verbal. So what do you think is the most important of these 3 V's when it comes to your communication being effective and engaging? Think about it. What do you think is the most important? The visual, the vocal, or the verbal? Okay, I'm going to share my favorite quote, which kind of gives you a hint of what the correct is. And that quote is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. What he said was, "What you do speak so loud I cannot hear what you say." What you do speak so loud I cannot hear what you say. Hint, hint. One of the most important parts of your communication's effectiveness is visual, followed by a close second with the vocal, how it sounds. So here we are in the virtual reality, online presence. So how things look and how things sound is actually so even super more important. So if you all said verbal, and you think, oh my God, I'm in such an important position. They want to know these facts. They want to know these statistics. They want to know what's going on. How can she possibly say that verbal is the least important? What I'm saying is not that verbal is unimportant, but it needs to be consistent with how you look and how you sound. Because if it isn't consistent, they are not going to be able to hear you. Because what happens is no matter how incredible the information that you're delivering might be, if you don't look confident when you're saying it, if you don't sound confident or trustworthy when you're saying it, those words are not going to have the impact that you really need them to have. Make sense? Here are some statistics that can be hit at home and be a little bit sobering. It takes 2 to 7 seconds to make a first impression. Now, if you're working with clients that you've already met, they already have an impression of you. However, you're creating a new impression when you're going on video. Because on video, this is the first time they may have seen you outside of the office, in your home environment. They're going to be paying a different type of attention to you, and it's going to be making a different type of impression. Someone just spoke to me recently. We were chatting and they said that they were on a call with someone and looked and their desk was a mess. And so what that puts in their head is, wow, this is an unorganized person. What's going on here? And people cannot help but make that slight judgment. And yes, you might be saying, oh, but they know how much value I bring. That's just ridiculous, Robyn. What are you talking about? However, our little brains are very, very activated by the visual and the vocal. And even though logically, our thinking brain logically is saying, yeah, they're really on top of things. There's this old part of our brain, which is called the reptilian brain, and then we have the mammalian brain on top of that, which is all emotion, and the reptilian brain is all just reaction. So that reptilian brain is seeing all the mess or seeing all the clutter, and it's thinking, wow, there's something wrong. There's a danger. What's going on? I'm not safe with that person. The logical brain is still thinking, but sometimes that emotional brain and that reactive brain is the one running the show. And especially nowadays when people are under stress, that part of the brain is super active. So you want to make sure that your visuals and vocals are on point through online meetings. The second statistic, nonverbal signals have 5 times as much impact as verbals. And it's 60 to 90% of your message. Now this third statistic is fairly sobering. It can take 3 to 17 visits to undo a negative first impression. When I'm dealing with in-person, I often say that that is a moot point, because when you think about it, who is going to give you 16 times to impress them? No. But like I said, some of those people are already in your circle. However, one of the findings that I've read is that on video, people are even less forgiving. So on video, a negative or an unattractive or any kind of a negative encounter on video has a lasting impact, a lasting impact. And I've witnessed that myself. I have had someone that I respected very much, and then they put out a video that was really not good. And though my logical brain kept trying to make up for it and saying, oh, that was just a mistake, it was very difficult for me to ever look at that person again in the same light as I had before. So those are some things you want to keep in mind. So what can you do? When you're talking visually, what can you do? First of all, lighting is so super important. Right now I have several lights in front of my face. Some that I've ordered on Amazon, some of them I have bouncing off a white screen. You know, I go really way out. I had a background in theater and acting on commercials, so I've been around a lot of lighting designers, so that's one of the things that I work on. So you want to make sure that the lighting is in front of your face. If you're sitting in front of a light source, you are going to be in the shadows, and that is going to imply lack of trust. So you want to make sure that that light is in front of you and that there is no light behind you. You also want to declutter your space. I just gave a reason for that. Right now, this is a screen that I bought years ago on Amazon. It's just one of those 3-panel screens that can make any space look calm and professional and clean and decluttered. And so you want to think about things like that. You also want to keep yourself centered in the space and still maintain that posture as though you were sitting in front of somebody, that standing up posture and leaning towards them. You don't want to be leaning back like this, because that gives a whole nother impression, just like it would in real life. You're leaning back, it's like I'm leaning away from you, I don't really care. You want to sit up straight and have that presence and make sure that you're centered. Now, the difference between being up here in the center of the frame and being down here, this isn't even as low. Some people only have like their little necks, talking head. That makes you look very much weaker. Look at all this space that's over my head. That does not put me in a strong position. So make sure that you are centered in your frame. And being centered also from the chest up or the waist up gives you the opportunity to gesture. And gestures are still helpful in the virtual world. It gets people's attention. You can indicate certain things, keeps people involved and engaged. And I know that on video, sometimes gestures are more obvious and more pronounced and can be a little bit distracting. Most of the time, those gestures are overdone, just like in anything else. And we'll talk about overdoing things in a bit too. So doing anything repetitively or too much could be distracting, but you do want to make a few opportunities to use your hands and use your gestures. And eye contact, of course, is important. We think that, you know, it's really challenging with the virtual space because we want to be looking down at the person who's talking. But when you're looking down at the person who's talking, sometimes if you're doing a meeting, yeah, that's fine. But if you're presenting something, you want to make sure that your eyes are at the camera and not on your slides, because then what happens if I'm looking down at my slides, oftentimes my eyelids will go down and it looks like my eyes are actually closed. So make sure that to practice looking at the camera, which is that little circle on your computer. Me, I have a web camera. I have an external web camera, which gives me a little bit more clarity and more breadth. And so those are some of the things for the visual tips. Now, the voice, the second most important part of your messaging, is super important on video as well. And some of the things that you want to think about is checking for the clarity and using an external microphone. Now, these one or two bullet points are kind of related, because sometimes your quality is lacking because your Wi-Fi speed is not up to par. And so there's all this crackling and all of that, and that's really annoying. So either it's your Wi-Fi or your microphone. So make sure that you check that. Me, I have an external microphone. I ordered it online years ago, and it can really make a huge difference, because when we're on our computer audio, it often sounds a little tinny and thin, so you can get much better vocal quality if you have an external microphone hooked in. And back to that quality of the whole picture, make sure that you have super fast Wi-Fi, or get yourself that old-fashioned Ethernet cable and plug it into your router, which is what I had to do, because I live in a large apartment building in New York City. Everybody is home, everybody is using their Wi-Fi, so the signal was getting really super weak. My husband is home. As soon as he's on, all of my calls got really bad. So we both got 50-foot Ethernet wires and plugged into the router, which makes connectivity so much easier, so much smoother, and never have an issue. Avoid long pauses, because so many times when people are having an issue, there's this big silence and nobody knows. So when you're talking to somebody, if all of a sudden you stop to think, what might be really normal in real life because they know that you're there, might sound like there's a technical difficulty, and people start to panic. So just fill your pauses. You don't want to fill them with garbage, but make sure that you don't pause for too long. Now, this next one is really interesting. One of the things that I am skilled in and practice, and I have a certification in neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the work with communication and the brain and how they work together, how we can reframe things, all of that. Anyway, one of the techniques that we study is the fact that you want to match and mirror somebody and then take them to where they need to be. Now, your clients are maybe going through a lot of stress right now, and you might think that you can get in there and cheer people up and be really confident and really strong and really chirpy or positive. But if they are in this low or depressed state and you go in gangbusters all chirpy and happy, that's a mismatch. So you want to match them, and then you can move them to where it would be a more resourceful place for you to get work done. So that when I'm talking about matching and mirroring, you can match their vocal tone, match the speed, the cadence, even sometimes the body language, you can match that, and it makes a difference. So you match that. You don't get all depressed with them, but you match it in your way. And then you slowly start to speed up the pace. You slowly start to bring in more positivity, more positive energy, and then you bring them along. So it's called, it's pacing. It's like you set it and you pace it. You match them, and then you pace them into another place. So we could talk more about that. If you're interested in any one-on-one services, just reach out to me and we'll talk about that. And vocal variety is so super important online. What could be considered or accepted in real life, which is not accepted by me in real life, which is like that slower or monotone or monotonous type of vocal tone, is super obvious in virtual and video. So giving more energy to your voice, giving more power, more inflection to your voice is going to be super helpful in being more engaging and getting heard online. And I just have to go over some of my pet peeves on vocal tone about what to avoid when you are in person and especially when you're online. So habits like upspeaking, I know none of you do that. I hope. But upspeaking is that way of sounding like everything is a question. And that really, like I talk a little bit about that lizard, that reptilian brain and the mammalian brain. What that sets off in that brain is like, is that person really sure? Yes, questions need to sound like questions, but how are you today is a question, but I want to give you this information. It's really, really helpful. If everything sounds like a question, they're going to really start to question in the back of their head, do you really know what you're talking about? You don't want to set anything in this climate, any cause for any doubt or any lacking in confidence you want to avoid, so avoid upspeaking. The other quality or habit that I hear people do is called drop speaking. I call it drop speaking. It's like you have all this energy at the beginning of the sentence and then you drop out at the end. You know, you have all this energy at the beginning and then you drop out at the end. And so nobody can hear you. And on virtual, especially if your quality isn't, if you don't have an external microphone, if you don't have great Wi-Fi, people can actually lose the ends of those sentences, and some really important things are said at the end of sentences. So you want to make sure that you don't do that drop speaking at the end. Now, my biggest pet peeve in online or offline is that whatever tone that we get in, you might want to call it even corporate speak. You're on the phone call, you're at a meeting, and everybody introduces themselves like they're bored out of their minds, right? Hi, my name is Robyn Hatcher. My company is Speak, etc. I work with financial advisors and lawyers to work on better their consulting and everything in their communication. And I'm really passionate about what I do. And everything sounds like you're bored out of your mind. So important to add inflection, add tone, add variety. Monotone, we know what that is. Know-it-all, it's like, especially in this climate, you really don't want to come off as a know-it-all with that really strong, yeah, I know that voice, like a school teacher, or that really stern, even paced, I'm going to tell you the facts thing. So those are tones that you want to be careful of. And if you're not sure what your tone sounds like, everybody has a smartphone. Every smartphone probably has an audio capture or memo feature. What I really encourage you to do is tape yourself. Tape yourself giving a speech, reading something. Tape a phone call, your side of a phone call, then listen back. And you want to look at, if you have one of those recorders, you want to look at those lines like I have here. Those lines here will show you what is going on with your voice. Now, if it's too much of the same, then what you're getting is monotone. If it is too low like this, what you're getting is monotone and too low. What you want is vocal variety. It's high here, it's low here, the da 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 da. That's what you want your recording to look like, because that is going to give the most engagement. So verbal. Yes, verbal is still important. So here are some tips for virtual online verbal communication. So you want to set expectations. People have a limited amount of time, even in this environment. They may have other things scheduled. You have less attention when you're online. There's all this multitasking that can happen and could happen and does happen when you're online. So set expectations. How long is it going to be? What are you going to talk about? This goes all the time, but in virtual, you really want to know how you're going to interact. Do you want people to interact? Do you want people to ask questions? Do you want to just speak and then have the questions? Do you want, if you're on Zoom or another platform, do you want them to use chat? Make sure that they know how to use chat. You want them to use Q&A? When are you going to answer the Q&A? Those are the expectations that you might want to talk about up front so people know what to expect. And use various engagement techniques. I'll go a little bit into some of the engagement techniques that I recommend, but make it vary so you're not just a talking head. And check in often. How's it going? Does anybody have any questions? Am I being clear? Am I making myself clear? All those normal check-in questions, make sure that you continue to do them when you're online. And your questions, if you're running a meeting or if you're doing a webinar, if you're giving information in a webinar, make sure that the questions that you ask are short enough to be for the listener to be able to hold them in their attention span so that they can answer them. This goes true online or offline, but a lot of times online, what happens is we give these long drawn out questions and people just don't have the bandwidth to figure out the answer, and then you've got this silence. So if you're going to ask a question, make sure that it's short and give them a short, if you're using the chat, give them a short way to answer, because typing takes a lot of time and chat is delayed. So if you want an answer, if you can give them a letter to use, like how many of you think that vocal, verbal, or in a live I could do that and say, give me a 1 for vocal, a 2 for visual, a 3 for verbal. And so you give them that. Or how many of you think this? Give me a Y for yes and N for no. So those are the short questions, and then you also prompt them with short ways to answer so that things can move quickly. And of course, if it's just one-on-one, you can take that time and talk to them through their writing, because it's going to be delayed and it takes some time. Now these are for both online and in person, but these next two things are much more magnified when you're in the virtual world. So you've got habits like non-word usage. And what do I mean by that? Those ums and those likes and those you knows or those basicallys. And you want to keep those to a minimum, because in the virtual world, when we're going from two dimension to from 3 dimension to 2 dimension, all of those things stand out even more. They're magnified. So if I'm sitting there and I'm listening to somebody say like, in person I might note it. On video, I'm thinking, oh, whoa. And then you start writing it down because you have the time. So if you get 20 likes in a sentence, that's going to be too much. But if that's your non-words, that's what people are going to then start paying attention to. They're not listening to the rest of your presentation or your speech or your conversation. The next thing I have here is avoid minimizing words. What I mean by minimizing words are those habits that make things lesser than. Some of the work that I do with financial advisors is I will go in and I will role play with them. And I've been in those role plays sometimes, and what will happen is the financial advisor might sit down and say to me, oh, hi, thanks for coming. I just want to give you my little agenda. How many minimizing words are in there? If you're dealing with someone's portfolio that is huge or is in trouble, or is like, I don't want to just get anything. I don't want it to be kinda, and I don't want the agenda to be little. So words like kinda and sort of, little, just, maybe, get rid of all those words because they are weakening. They're minimizing your content, and they're not making you seem confident and trustworthy. Now, I know a lot of people say that they want to use words like that to soften the blow. There are other ways of doing it, and those are some of the things that I talk about one-on-one, how you can minimize the blow in those conversations, but you don't want to do it by minimizing your self-worth and your confidence. And then repeat key messages, because people forget a lot. And you want to go in with every conversation with at least one huge overriding bottom line. And you also want to go in with at least 3 key messages. Anything more than 3, people probably won't remember them. So you want to make sure that you have at least 3 key messages, and whatever those are, you repeat them as much as possible. Is it safety? Is it walking, moving through? Is it a new product? Whatever it is, find a way to repeat it in different forms, different ways, different habits, but make sure that they're repeated so that people will remember it after they hang up. So those are some verbal skills, but the number one verbal skill, and I know you all know this, but I just want to go over it a little bit, is the number one verbal skill that you always need, and every profession, everybody always forgets, to share benefits before you talk about features. And we've heard this over and over again, but I'm telling you, in the hundreds or thousands of financial advisor meetings that I have taken in my role as a consultant and a communication expert and a presentation skills expert, I think 90% of them lead with features before benefits. When I talk to any entrepreneur, they lead with features before benefits. The benefits, and so I'm wondering, maybe people are still confused about what the difference is. So here's a little quick tip that I'm going to go over with you about what are the difference between features. Features answer what? What are the characteristics? What are the specifications? What are the descriptions? So you might be talking about the, a 401k, or you may be talking about a 529 plan, and you're going to give all the features about what is in it. Yeah, those are the characteristics. Okay, that is this, and how much is taken away, and what are the percentages, all of that. Those are not as interesting or as helpful to make an engaging presentation as the benefits. What are the benefits? Explain how the service or products value. So the benefits answer, so what? What is it as a value? How is it making that person's life better? How is it making life in general for general people better? How are their features addressing a need? And for this particular time, when you're talking to clients or prospects, you want to actually go into the specific benefits. And the specific benefits answer what's in it for me. And that's always important, but in this time, what's in it for me? That explains how your service and product is going to help a particular client or a particular individual, because people need to be heard. They don't want to know what other people are doing or what's beneficial for the world or what's beneficial for the economy. Deep down inside, people care about themselves first. So what is that individual's need, want, and value? And I know you all know this, but I just want to reiterate it here in black and white or blue and white or whatever it is, so that you remember, because often we forget, because it's like, oh, these features are so good. These features are going to help this person. But we forget. Emotion sells, logic tells. So you want to find that emotional need before you get to the brilliant features. Making it interactive. You want to make it interactive. And a lot of those things, acknowledge who's there, ask short and simple answers. I talked about that. Like if this is a meeting, start with a simple yes and no, check in for questions and comments, use chat, Q&A, polls, quizzes, breakouts, and spotlight. If you're doing a meeting, like call somebody out. Use people's names. People love to be acknowledged. And even if you don't have time to acknowledge everybody's first name, make sure that you now acknowledge enough people so that they see that you're an open and caring person. Now, I talked about, the emotion of the clients. Emotion sells, logic tells. One of the main emotions right now for everybody is fear. And we've heard a lot of great definitions about fear. One of the more popular ones is false evidence appearing real. Well, let's face it, a lot of the evidence that we're getting around all of this financial crisis and this pandemic are not false. It's real evidence. I have another definition for fear, which I feel like is very helpful for us to think about during this time, and especially before you start to talk to or interact with clients and prospects. My definition of fear is failure to envision an alternate reality. So we are so afraid because it's very difficult to envision what life is going to be like after this pandemic. It's very difficult to imagine that. But the act of imagining it is a very helpful exercise. So if you can imagine what you want for yourself in this other reality, on the end of the other side of the pandemic. That is an opportunity for your brain to start to reprogram itself. It's an opportunity for your brain to start to relax a little bit. Doesn't mean it's a miracle bullet, not going to necessarily change the outcome of anything. But once you do that, once you understand that, and once you start to reframe, there's an opportunity for collaboration. There's an opportunity for me to share this product, which is going to be really helpful. There's an opportunity for us to rework this plan. What are some of the opportunities or some of the visions that you can get behind for yourself, your client? So what are some of the new realities that you might be able to envision? And like I said, it's so important to do that before you hop on that call or hop on that phone, because fear is contagious and people can smell it. And even though we're not face to face, they can sense it in your body language, in your vocal tone. So think about a new reality that you can start to imagine for them. Have that uppermost in your brain before you connect, so that when you do connect, you're connecting from a place of new vision and possibility and strength. And make sure that you meet them where they are. Again, I'm not saying this is so, like I said earlier, you don't go in and say, oh, great, I got all this new reality for you. You meet them with you where they are, but you have the sense of that solidness, that reality that you own, that sense of possibility, that little glimmer of hope that you can impart and share with them.